Has anyone ever wondered what WrestleMania 22 would have looked like if Batista didn't get injured in January that year? Well, today we're going to talk about that. What's up, everyone? It's Chris back again with a milestone episode of What Could Have Been in Wrestling. This is episode 40. And today we're going back to 2006, and we're talking about what if Batista didn't get injured that year in January and have to forfeit the World Heavyweight title. So let's just jump right into it. In January that year, Mark Henry had made his return, and during the tag title cage match between the champions Mysterio and Batista against M&M, he was able to rip the door off, and he was the one who cost Batista and Mysterio those titles, and it helped obviously further the feud between him and Batista, and Mark Henry was clearly the one being built up as the number one contender going into the Rumble that year. After that attack, when they face each other in a house show later that week, that's where Batista's back injury happened. Batista came out on SmackDown the following week with Teddy Long and announced that he had been working through injuries, but he had had a back injury severe enough that he'd be out indefinitely. Because of that, he was forced to forfeit the World Heavyweight title, which is what he did when he gave it to Teddy Long, but he did vow that he'd be back and he'd retain his title. After he had departed, there was that battle royal to determine a new heavyweight champion, and that's when Kurt Angle made his surprise appearance, and he won the World Heavyweight title. So he shifted over from Raw to SmackDown, and made a face turn not long after. With that in mind, Kurt Angle was the one who basically stepped in Batista's role, and he faced Mark Henry at the Royal Rumble that year. So, to backtrack, if Batista doesn't get injured, a lot of things change. First of all, I think Batista and Mark Henry continue on their collision course leading up to the Rumble, where Mark Henry, I think, is built up very strong as a credible challenger to take Batista's belt. And I think they wind up obviously facing at the Rumble. That match obviously would have been very hard-hitting. I don't think you'd see any technical moves being utilized. And you can have it where Batista's being overwhelmed by Mark Henry's strength, and things could be in doubt. But at the end, Batista, I don't know if he could have gotten Henry up for a Batista bomb, but I think he could have gotten him up for a spine buster, and he would have retained his title. On the flip side, Kurt Angle, I think, remains a heel on Raw, and I think he's still in the WWE title picture, chasing John Cena. And one more time, he might face him on Raw, but I don't think Kurt Angle is actually a champion going into WrestleMania 22. So I think that's a big change there. Back to the SmackDown side, after the Mark Henry match is concluded, what had happened in reality is that The Undertaker came back, and he laid claim as the next challenger to Kurt Angle's world title. And those two did face each other at No Way Out the following month, in a match in which Kurt Angle, after he had gotten caught in a go-go plata, turned it into a pinning combination and retained his belt. I actually don't think that happens here. Reason being is because I think a match like Batista and The Undertaker, you would want to save a marquee match like that for a WrestleMania, which obviously happened the next year at WrestleMania 23. So even if The Undertaker does return post-Royal Rumble with Batista still as champion, I don't think he's the next number one contender, because I don't think you want their first match for the belt to be on a B-show pay-per-view. The person I think they would go back to, who would lay claim to be champion and would want one more shot at Batista, would, in my opinion, be JBL. I know at the time, he was still obviously on the SmackDown roster, and he was going to go on to become the U.S. champion at Mania, but I think he would get one more shot at the world title belt. He could probably weasel his way into that, maybe by winning a number one contenders match, or cajoling Teddy Long to give him just one more match. Obviously, like I said, with this being a B-list pay-per-view, to be honest, because that's what No Way Out was always treated as, I think you could go back to a match they've done before so they can run that back, and it would be JBL and Batista one more time, to the delight of almost no one. In regards to what would happen also for who would have been the number one contender for the world title, that being Rey Mysterio, with his Royal Rumble win. I know obviously he went on to face Randy Orton and put his number one contender status on the line, and he lost to Randy Orton. But then Teddy Long right after that made it a triple threat match at Mania between Orton, Angle, and Mysterio. With Batista still around as champion, I don't think, if we can backtrack to the Royal Rumble, I don't think Rey Mysterio wins the Royal Rumble. Instead, I would like Batista's counterpart from Evolution to win it. And I think the winner of the 2006 Royal Rumble would be Randy Orton. Mysterio and Orton could still be the final two members, or participants, I should say, in the Rumble that year. But instead of Rey pulling off the miracle, I think it should be Orton getting the elimination and being able to stake his claim as the challenger to Batista's world title at Mania. At No Way Out, you can still have Mysterio and Orton go one-on-one, with Orton having to put his number one contendership on the line. But he can still win by cheating like he did. And with that in mind, he remains the number one contender, and I don't think it should become a triple threat match. So with No Way Out now in the rear view, and Batista retaining his belt, obviously like he would have against JBL, and Randy Orton remaining the number one contender, you now have a one-on-one match set for the world title at Mania, with it being, obviously, the two members, like I said, the two guys who were built through Evolution, and obviously I think it would be very important to play on their past association and talk about how they were the two handpicked by Flair and Triple H to be future stars of the company, and now you have them fighting for the World Heavyweight title. As we lead up to it, I think it'd be very important to have that face-to-face confrontation on SmackDown, where Batista is able to remind Orton that last year, when you had a chance to come into Mania as champion, and you had a chance to beat Triple H for this same title, you choked. Because that's what you do in big moments. While Batista can talk about how he seized the moment, and he beat Triple H last year, and he's walking in as champion, and he'll be walking out as champion. Randy Orton can then stake claim as being the number one contender, talk about how just as Batista won the Royal Rumble last year, Randy Orton was the winner this year, and it's very appropriate that they face at Mania, and that it's Randy Orton's, like he was doing in 2005, it's his destiny to become the World Heavyweight Champion. And just like Batista did it last year, Randy Orton's gonna win it this year. So that could be the setting as we head to WrestleMania 22. And with that in mind, as we head to WrestleMania and we have their one-on-one match this time, I think it would still be unfortunately slotted in the middle of the card, as I think the main event would still be reserved for John Cena and Triple H. But this match would have a much better story behind it, like I said, with their time together in Evolution, and obviously all the history they have there. And in the end, obviously, while it'd be a back and forth match, I think Randy Orton should be the one who hits Batista with an RKO out of nowhere And I think it should be his time and his crowning moment to become the World Heavyweight Champion. And I think you finally have Orton getting his big WrestleMania moment at a very young age. And actually, this would be his second time holding the belt. But this time, I think this is someone the company would get behind for a much longer reign than he had his first time. With that in mind, post-WrestleMania, if we go into who the feuds could have been with, I think, honestly, Randy Orton's first feud should have been, as world champion, with the young upstart, Bobby Lashley. I think that'd be good to get Lashley exposure in the main event picture, considering he was someone they were clearly pushing at the time. And it would be a good first opponent for Randy Orton to get through, as obviously just physically Lashley has a look of someone who could obviously match up with an Orton and has the same kind of build as Batista. And I think it'd be a good feather in Orton's cap to get a victory over him. And like I said, it would be a good exposure for Lashley. So I think post-WrestleMania, you would have Orton feuding with Lashley as the first guy who would be the number one contender. For Batista, I think actually post-Mania, he would actually be stepping away from the world title scene. The reason I want to do that is because I actually like that pairing that he had with Mysterio when he and him were world tag champions. Like I said, it was similar to the Shawn Michaels Diesel pairing, where it's a big man and a little man paired together. And I think actually they should go back to teaming up, and I think they could actually regain the world tag titles post-Mania. Obviously for Rey Mysterio, it would be a very small consolation compared to what happened where he did win the world title. And obviously with Eddie's death still fresh in people's minds, I think there was a push for Mysterio with his relationship with Eddie Guerrero to win the world title. So I know this alteration would take that moment away from him. But I honestly feel personally that the story between Batista and Orton is bigger and has a better backstory, like I said. And obviously with Batista's relationship with Eddie Guerrero, that's why I want them to stay together as a team and become the World Tag Team Champions again. And honestly, if you look back at Mysterio post the WrestleMania win and the moment he had with Chavo and Vicky, his reign was nothing to write home about, and he was constantly squashed by guys like the Great Khali and Mark Henry week to week. And outside of that one great match he had with Sabu at the second ECW One Night Stand for the world title, there was nothing really memorable about that reign. So I actually don't think you lose too much by not having Mysterio win the title. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I know obviously that doesn't go too deep into Orton's reign, and it only goes through his first competitor that he would face post-Mania, that being, like I said, a feud with Bobby Lashley. And let me know, obviously, if you'd like me to expand on this with a part 2, and I can obviously go deeper into it and lead us to SummerSlam, where I ultimately feel, obviously, where Batista and Orton would have their rematch. So leave your thoughts and comments down below. Let me know what you think of my take on Randy Orton and Batista going at it at Mania, had Batista not been injured. Let me know what you think of my thoughts of Randy Orton winning the Royal Rumble that year instead of Rey Mysterio. And let me know also if you liked that Mysterio and Batista pairing as a tag team and winning the tag champions, because like I said, that was a pairing I really thought they should have done more with. Also, like I always say, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what other future topics you'd like me to talk about, and I'll be sure to make it happen. So, thanks for sticking with me through these 40 episodes so far, and there's definitely more to come. I look forward to hearing from everyone's comments, and thanks a lot, guys.